Evelyn Carter burned the letter on a Tuesday morning. She held it over the candle flame and watched her father's handwriting curl black at the edges, the words, "You will obey," disappearing last, as if even fire knew which words deserved to die first. Her hands did not shake. Her eyes did not fill. She had already made her decision before the ash hit the floor. She would not walk into that man's house as his bride. She would walk in as his maid, and she would learn every truth he was hiding before she gave him one single day of her life. If this story already has you holding your breath, subscribe to this channel. Stay with me until the very end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. The morning Evelyn Carter stepped off the wagon in front of Hawthorne Manor, the Virginia sky was the color of a bruise, that particular shade of purple gold that comes in the last week of July, when the heat sits so heavy on the land, it feels like the earth itself is tired of carrying it. She wore a gray dress. Plain cotton, no lace, no ribbon. The kind of dress a woman wore when she wanted the world to look right through her. That was the point. She carried a single bag, small enough that anyone watching from the road would think she was just another girl looking for domestic work in a wealthy household. She had stuffed it with 2 changes of clothes, her father's surveying notes on the Hawthorne land parcels, and the letter. She had not burned the real letter. She had burned the copy. She kept the original because she was her father's daughter, and her father had always said, never destroy a document you might need in court. Evelyn had her reasons for being here, and every single one of them was calculated. Gang. The iron gate of Hawthorne Manor stood open when she arrived, not in welcome, but in the particular way of a house that had stopped expecting guests. The hinges were dark with rust. One side leaned slightly inward, like a man who had been standing too long without anyone asking if he needed rest. She paused at the gate. For exactly 3 seconds she let herself feel it, the fear, the doubt, the very reasonable voice in the back of her mind that asked Evelyn, what in God's name are you doing? 3 seconds. Then she picked up her bag and walked through. The housekeeper who met her at the side entrance was a stout woman of perhaps 60, with the kind of face that had once been warm and was now simply tired. She looked Evelyn up and down the way a person surveys land before deciding whether it's worth farming. "You're the girl from Charlottesville," the woman said. Not a question exactly, more like a test. "Yes, ma'am," Evelyn said. She kept her voice low, her eyes lower. "Emma Briggs. I was told there was work. There's always work." The woman sighed, the sound of someone who had given that answer too many times. "I'm Mrs. Aldridge. I run this house. What I say goes, not the groundskeepers, not the stable boys, and not—" She paused, and something moved behind her eyes. "Not the man who owns it, God help us all. You understand me?" "Yes, ma'am. You'll scrub, you'll serve, you'll be invisible. You'll speak when spoken to, and you will not under any circumstances disturb the Duke when he is in his study." Mrs. Aldridge folded her hands in front of her apron. "We've lost 3 girls in 4 months because they couldn't manage that last part." Evelyn kept her expression neutral. "Lost them?" she asked carefully. "They quit," Mrs. Aldridge said with the emphasis of a woman correcting a rumor she had grown sick of correcting. "He didn't eat them, despite what the county seems to believe." She turned toward the door. "Come along, Emma. I'll show you the kitchen." Hawthorne Manor from the outside looked like power. From the inside it looked like grief. Evelyn noticed it immediately, the way grief lives in a house long after the person who carried it is gone. It was in the dusty portraits on the hall walls, their subjects turned slightly away from one another, as if even in oil paint they couldn't bear to look at each other. It was in the dining room, where the long mahogany table was set for one at the far end, and the rest of the chairs had been pushed back against the wall, unnecessary, unwanted. It was in the east wing corridor where someone had nailed the shutters closed on 3 consecutive windows, and the afternoon light came through in thin stripes like bars. She had read everything she could find about William Hawthorne before she came here. She had read the newspaper accounts Hawthorne accused of negligence in land dispute. Hawthorne denies wrongdoing. Hawthorne refuses comment. She had read the social letters her mother's friends passed around like currency ruthless man. Cold as January. The estate was already dying before his wife passed some, say he. She had read the legal documents her father kept locked in his study, the ones she was not supposed to have read concerning the proposed marriage arrangement between the Carter family and the Hawthorne estate. She had read everything, and she had learned exactly one truth from all of it. Nobody who wrote about William Hawthorne had ever actually spoken to him. She intended to change that. Her first full day in the house was uneventful by any standard except her own. She scrubbed the kitchen floor before dawn. She carried water from the pump in the yard. She helped the cook, a quiet black woman named Ruth, who moved through the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who had long ago made peace with the fact that the work never ended, prepare breakfast for a household that barely ate. "Does he always eat alone?" Evelyn asked, Ruth keeping her voice casual as she sliced bread at the cutting board. Ruth glanced at her sideways. "The Duke takes his meals in the study. Every meal. Every meal that he takes." Ruth paused, a pot held midair. "Which is not every meal." Evelyn filed that away. In the late morning, she was sent to dust the library, a room that stretched the entire west wall of the ground floor floor-to-ceiling shelves. The kind of collection that told you this family had been educated and proud, and at some point genuinely happy. She worked methodically, moving shelf by shelf, not reading the titles so much as reading what the titles said about the man who had chosen them. Law, land management, agricultural science, a surprising number of books on child development and education, a copy of Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, well worn at the spine. She stopped at that one, picked it up, set it back. Interesting, she thought. She heard Clara before she saw her. A small sound from behind the curtain near the window, not quite a sob, not quite a breath, somewhere in between. Evelyn set down her dustcloth. "Hello," she said quietly. "Nothing. I won't tell anyone you're here," Evelyn said. "I promise." A pause. Then the curtain moved. The child who appeared was small for 7, fine-boned, dark-haired, with enormous gray eyes that held the particular expression of a person who has learned too young that the world is not reliably safe. She was wearing a white dress that was slightly too large for her, and she was holding a book pressed against her chest like a shield. They stared at each other. "You're new," Clara said. "I am," Evelyn agreed. "I'm Emma." "Emma," Clara repeated, tasting the name. "Are you staying?" "I hope so." Clara considered this with the gravity of a 7-year-old conducting serious business. The last one left because she was afraid of Uncle William. "Are you afraid of your uncle?" Evelyn asked. Clara shook her head, certain and immediate. "Uncle William is sad," she said. "Not scary. People mix those up." Evelyn felt something move in her chest, slow, quiet, like water finding a new level. "They do," she agreed. "People mix those up all the time." She did not see William Hawthorne until the 3rd day. She was crossing the upper hall with a basket of clean linens when she heard his voice, low-controlled, coming from behind the closed study door. "The court date has been moved to September," he was saying, "which gives us less than 6 weeks. Sir, if I may." Another voice. An older man. A lawyer from the formality of it. "You may not." Flat. Final. Not cruel, just absolute in the way of a man who had learned that allowing room for argument only extended the pain. "I don't need your opinion on the matter, Hargrove. I need those documents authenticated before the 15th. Can you do that or not?" "I can. But the cost?" "I will manage the cost. What I cannot manage is losing that case." A silence. Then, "She deserves what's hers, Hargrove. That is the only consideration I have." The door swung open. Evelyn pressed herself back against the wall, too late to move too close, to pretend she hadn't been standing there. William Hawthorne stopped in the doorway, He was taller than she had imagined from the newspaper descriptions, broader through the shoulder. He wore no jacket, shirt sleeves, waistcoat, unbuttoned, the kind of undress that meant he'd been at his desk since before dawn. His hair was dark and slightly too long, and his face held the particular quality of a man who had not slept well in a very long time and had made his peace with that fact. His eyes were gray, the same gray as Clara's. He looked at her. She looked at him. "Who are you?" he said. "Emma Briggs, sir." She dipped her head, not a curtsy, just an acknowledgement. "Mrs. Aldridge hired me 3 days ago. I'm sorry if I was in your way." He studied her for a moment with the kind of attention that had nothing predatory in it. It was assessment, purely the way a man looks at a map before he decides which road to take. "You weren't in my way," he said finally, and he walked past her down the hall without another word. She told herself it meant nothing. She had not come here to be moved by a man's voice. She had come here to discover whether the man who was to be her husband was the cold, calculating opportunist that everyone said he was, or whether, as her own instincts insisted infuriatingly, the truth was something more complicated than what people said over tea. She had heard him on the second night through the wall of the east corridor. He had been speaking to Clara at bedtime. She hadn't intended to hear. It had simply been passing with towels for the morning. But the door was open a crack, and his voice had come through low and even, reading aloud from what she recognized as Aesop's fables. The tortoise challenged the hare to a race. Everyone laughed at the tortoise. Clara's voice. Did it make him sad? A pause. "I think it made him determined," William said. "There is a difference." Another pause. "Uncle William." "Yes." "Do you miss Mama?" The longest silence Evelyn had ever heard, contained in a single hallway. "Every day," he said. "Are you warm enough?" "Yes." "Good night, Clara." "Good night." On the 6th day, Evelyn found the room. She had not been looking for it. She had been sent to clean the east wing, shuttered, unused, and she was working her way methodically down the corridor when she found the door that wasn't fully closed. She pushed it open. It was a nursery, or it had been once. Now it was preserved. The word felt right, like a specimen in a jar, like something someone had wanted to keep exactly as it was, because changing it would mean accepting that it was over. The rocking horse in the corner, the small bookshelf, the cradle made of dark cherry wood still holding a faded blue blanket. On the dresser, a portrait, a woman with dark hair and a serious face holding an infant. Beside her, slightly apart, a younger William Hawthorne, recognizable but different. Different in the way that hope is different from endurance, different in the way a man looks before the world removes something he cannot replace. Beneath the portrait, a small handwritten card, Margaret and James. Spring 1812. A wife and a child. Not just a wife, a child. Evelyn stood very still in the doorway of that room for a long time. She had known he was the widower. The county knew that. What the county had not mentioned, what none of the letters, none of the newspaper accounts, none of her mother's friends' vicious social correspondence had bothered to include, was this: he had lost a son. She went to find Mrs. Aldridge. "The East Nursery," she said. She kept her voice steady. "Who was the baby?" Mrs. Aldridge looked at her a long, measuring look. Then she sat down at the kitchen table, which was Evelyn had already learned the thing Mrs. Aldridge did when something required her full attention. "James William Hawthorne," the housekeeper said. "Born March 1812. Died September 1812. 6 months old." She folded her hands. His mother passed 3 days after him. The same fever. It moved through the household so fast that by the time anyone understood what was happening, she stopped. His sister and her husband died that same week. Clara's parents. The Duke was the only adult in this house who survived it. Evelyn said nothing. "He was 28 years old," Mrs. Aldridge said. "He buried his wife, his son, his sister, and his brother-in-law inside of 1 week. And then he was left with Clara, 6 months old herself, too young to remember any of them. The housekeeper looked at her hands. The county called it God's judgment. Said it was punishment for I don't remember what sin they decided he'd committed that particular week. People will find a reason. He's been raising her alone, Evelyn said. He has. For 3 years. Going on 4. Evelyn sat down across from the older woman. Outside through the kitchen window, she could hear Clara in the yard, a child's laughter bright and sudden, the sound of someone who did not yet carry the weight of what had been lost before she was old enough to know it. They say he's cold, Evelyn said. Mrs. Aldridge made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had contained any humor. He's careful, she said. There is a difference. He loved his wife and his son, and they were gone in a week. He loves Clara, and people are trying to take her. A man gets careful, Miss Emma. A man gets very, very careful about what he allows himself to feel in front of other people. She stood smoothing her apron. Now, you've got the upstairs hall yet to do, and... The letter arrived on a Thursday. Evelyn knew this because she was the one who carried the post from the gate to the house, one of a dozen small tasks that Mrs. Aldridge distributed through the staff each morning, and she saw the seal before she handed the stack to the housekeeper. Carver and Associates, Richmond, Virginia. She knew that name. Her father's notes had mentioned it twice. The law firm that represented the Carver family, distant relations of a former business partner of the late Duke Hawthorne Sr., which gave them precisely enough legal standing to be dangerous, and not quite enough to win. They were the ones challenging Clara's guardianship, the ones who said William Hawthorne was unfit. She handed the letter to Mrs. Aldridge without a word. But that evening, when she passed the study and heard William's voice through the door, low and controlled, and utterly exhausted, she paused. She was not ashamed of it. She had come here to learn the truth. They've submitted a new affidavit, he was saying, claiming the land parcels in the northeast section were transferred improperly, that I've been mismanaging Clara's inheritance. And have you? Hargrove's voice again. A sharp silence. Every document is in order, William said very quietly. Every transfer, every deed, every record. I have never touched a cent of what belongs to her. Everything I have done has been to protect what is hers. I believe you, sir. I don't need you to believe me. I need you to prove it. A beat. Because that hearing is in 6 weeks, and if they take her from this house, Hargrove, if they put that child in the care of people who see her as an asset... His voice broke. Just slightly. Just enough. She is 7 years old. She is the only thing left of my sister. I will not allow it. Evelyn moved away from the door. She walked to the back of the house, through the kitchen, out into the yard. And she stood in the hot Virginia night, and she breathed. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear. From the particular fury of someone who has been told a story, believed it, and then discovered that the story was built on a foundation of deliberate lies. She found Clara the next morning in the garden, the overgrown stretch of it behind the house, where someone had once planted roses, and they had continued without supervision, which in Virginia heat meant they had done exactly as they pleased. Clara was sitting in the dirt, carefully transferring a beetle from one stone to another. "Good morning," Evelyn said. "Good morning, Emma." Clara held the beetle up for inspection. "His name is Arthur." "How do you know he's a he?" Clara considered this. "He walks like he's going somewhere important." Evelyn sat down beside her in the dirt, unconcerned about her dress. "Miss Clara," she said, "may I ask you something?" "You can call me Clara," the child said. "Miss Clara is what they call me in court." Her voice, 7 years old and already carrying the weight of that word, went quiet. "I don't like court." "I know," Evelyn said. "I'm sorry." Clara looked at her sideways, that gray gaze so like her uncle's, so much older than it should have been. "Do you think they'll take me away?" Evelyn held the child's eyes. She thought of William Hawthorne's voice breaking in that study. She thought of the nursery in the East Wing, preserved like a prayer. She thought of her father's surveying notes in her bag upstairs, the land records that she alone in this household, knew how to read the records that she was increasingly certain contained the answer to everything. "No," she said. "I don't think they will." "How do you know?" "Because someone is going to stop them," Evelyn said. Clara looked back at the beetle. "I hope so," she said. "Uncle William pretends he isn't scared, but I can tell." She paused. "He gets very quiet when he's scared. Like all his words go somewhere inside and they can't get out." Evelyn looked at the child, at the roses blooming without permission across the garden wall, at the house behind them full of silence and grief, and a man who had been carrying alone what no person should ever carry alone. "Clara," she said, "your uncle is the bravest man I've ever—" She stopped herself. "I've ever seen," she finished. That night, she could not sleep. She lay in the small room she'd been given off the kitchen, and she stared at the ceiling in the Virginia heat, and she thought about what she was doing, what she had set out to do, which was to find the truth, and what she had found instead, which was so much more complicated than the truth she had expected. She had expected to find cruelty, or at minimum indifference, a man who wanted a wife the way he wanted a housekeeper for function not feeling. She had found a man who wept in silence over a child he was fighting to protect. She had found a man who paid his workers fairly, who kept every legal document in perfect order out of a principle so fierce it had become his only remaining religion, who read Aesop's fables to a little girl every night because someone had to, and because he loved her. She had found something she had not prepared for. She was running out of reasons to keep lying to him. And then she made a mistake. It was small, careless, the kind of mistake that happens when you are thinking about something else, and your hands do the thing they know how to do without asking your mind for permission. She was in the library she had taken to spending the hour before dinner there, dusting shelves she had already dusted, using the access to quietly inventory the documents in the unlocked drawer of the writing desk when William Hawthorne walked in. She reached automatically for her father's notes in her apron pocket. She missed. They fell. A sheaf of papers, her father's handwriting, the Hawthorne land, survey, the grid references and boundary markers, and the notation in the corner that read in her father's distinct hand, "Carter Survey, 1814, for arranged marriage review." They scattered across the library floor like an accusation. She moved fast. She was on her knees gathering them before they had finished falling, but not fast enough. William Hawthorne had already crossed the room. He picked up one page. He read it. She watched his face, watched the stillness that came over it, the careful, absolute stillness of a man who is understanding something slowly and does not yet know what to do with what he understands. He read it again. Then he looked at her. Evelyn set his eyes before his mouth said anything at all. Not Emma. "Evelyn, these are Carter survey documents," he said. His voice was very quiet. "From the Carter family estate in Charlottesville." A pause. "The same family whose daughter I am contracted to marry." She did not move. "Your name," he said, "is not Emma." It was not a question. The room held itself very still around them, the books, the fading afternoon light, the sound of Clara laughing somewhere outside in the yard. Evelyn Carter raised her head and looked at the man she had come here to judge. "No," she said, "it's not." He did not shout. She had expected shouting, or at minimum the cold fury she had heard about the thing the county described as his most fearsome quality, the voice that could end a conversation by dropping to a certain register. Instead, he set the paper down on the desk with the precision of a man managing himself very carefully. "How long?" he said. 9 days. 9 days. He turned away, moved to the window, stood with his back to her hands clasped behind him, looking out at the yard where Clara was chasing something, a chicken maybe, or Arthur the beetle, or one of the dozen small joys that a 7-year-old could find in an overgrown garden. "You came into my house as a servant." "Yes." "You have been in my study." She paused. "The hallway outside it," she said. "I have not been inside." "You've been—" He stopped. His shoulders dropped not in defeat, but in the particular exhaustion of a man who has been carrying too much and has just discovered that the ground beneath his feet is not what he thought it was. "You've been watching me." "Yes." "Why?" It was not the voice she had expected. It was not anger exactly. It was something rawer than anger. The voice of a man trying to decide whether this was a wound or a mercy and not yet knowing which. "Because," she said, "my father arranged a marriage without asking me. And I decided that if I was going to give my life to a man I had never met, I was going to know who he was first." He turned around. She met his eyes. "And," he said. She did not look away. "And," she said, "you are not what they say you are." The silence stretched between them long and complicated, and full of something she didn't have a word for, yet something that lived in the space between what she had come here expecting and what she had found. "Miss Carter," he said finally. "Sir?" "Get out of my house," she breathed. "I understand," she said. She gathered the survey papers, folded them, put them in her apron pocket, stood. "Before I go, there is something you should know." He said nothing. "The documents that Carver and Associates are citing in their case, the land transfer records from the northeast parcels, they are citing them incorrectly. They are reading the boundary markers wrong or pretending to." She kept her voice even, professional. Her father's daughter. "I can prove it. I have my father's original survey from 1814. The one he conducted before this arrangement was ever discussed. It shows every transfer in the northeast section was filed properly, every deed is clean, and there is an additional notation." She stopped. "There is a notation that Carver's lawyers have conveniently not mentioned in their affidavit, one that I believe will end their case." He stared at her. "Why are you telling me this?" he said. "Because Clara deserves to stay in her home," she said. She tucked the papers under her arm. "Good evening, Mr. Hawthorne," she said. "I'll be out of the house within the hour." And she walked toward the door. She was almost through it when his voice stopped her. "Miss Carter." She paused. She did not turn around. "The notation," he said. "What does it say?" She stood in the doorway for a long moment, the library behind her, the hall in front, the whole weight of 9 days pressing on her from every direction. She turned. "It says," she said, "that the northeast parcels were placed in trust for a minor child, Clara's name, and the trustee's signature at the bottom of the document." She paused. "It's yours." He was very still. "Registered in Richmond," she said, "before your sister even died, before any of it. You set it up in advance, to protect her." She looked at him across the width of the library. "You knew something might happen to them. You set up the trust anyway, and the Carver lawyers either don't know that document exists, or they're hoping the court doesn't know." The afternoon light shifted. Somewhere outside, Clara's laughter rose and dissolved on the hot Virginia air. "Stay," William Hawthorne said. The word was quiet, stripped of everything except what it was. "Not as a servant," he said. "Not—" He stopped, took a breath, tried again. "I need to see that document." "I know," she said. "And we need to talk," he said, "about a great many things." "I know that too," she said. She turned and walked back into the room and set the papers on the desk between them. Outside in the July heat, Clara was laughing in the roses, and Evelyn Carter, who had arrived at this man's door in a gray dress with a lie on her lips and the truth in her pocket, began to wonder if she had miscalculated something. Not about the documents, not about the case, about herself, about what it meant to watch a person and learn them slowly and find them when you finally stopped looking for what you expected to see, something you had not prepared to want. The papers sat between them on the desk like a verdict waiting to be read. William Hawthorne did not reach for them immediately. He stood with his arms at his sides, and he looked at Evelyn Carter, really looked at her the way he had not permitted himself to look at anyone in a very long time. And she could see the exact moment he stopped trying to decide how angry to be and started trying to decide what was true. "Sit down," he said. She sat. He did not. He moved to the other side of the desk and stood behind his chair, both hands gripping the back of it, and she understood that the chair was not furniture right now. It was a boundary. It was the last reasonable distance between a man who had just had the floor taken out from under him and the woman responsible for the removal. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning. Leave nothing out." So she did. She told him about the letter her father had sent, the formal bloodless document informing her that an arrangement had been made between the Carter family and the Hawthorne estate, that she was to present herself at the end of the summer, that this was, in her father's precise legal phrasing, a matter of mutual benefit and reasonable expectation. She told him about the 3 days she had spent after reading that letter, going through every document in her father's study that mentioned the Hawthorne name. She told him about the newspapers, the social letters, the whispers that followed his name through every drawing room in Virginia like smoke following a fire. She told him evenly and without apology that she had decided she would not walk into a stranger's house as a bride without first knowing what kind of man lived there. He listened without interrupting. That surprised her more than anything else had surprised her in 9 days. When she finished, the study was very quiet. "You read my correspondence," he said. "I have not been in this room before tonight," she said. "I read what I could hear through the door." Which was enough to understand that you are not what they say you are. He released the back of the chair, walked to the window. The Virginia night was heavy and close, the kind of July dark that pressed against the glass like it wanted to come inside. "What do they say I am?" he said. She considered the question seriously, the way it deserved. "Cold," she said. "Calculating. A man who married for property and lost interest when the property became a person. A man who keeps a child in his house out of legal obligation and nothing else." She paused. "They say you frightened your wife, that the household was miserable under your management, that you are the kind of man who sees people as instruments." He did not move. "And you," he said, "what do you say?" "I say," she said carefully, "that you read Aesop's fables to a 7-year-old girl every night because someone has to, and because you love her, and that you set up a legal trust for her inheritance before her parents were even gone, because you were the kind of man who protected people before they needed protecting." She held his eyes across the room. "I say the county has never bothered to look at you long enough to see any of that." The silence that followed was different from the silences that had come before it. This one had weight. This one meant something. "You said there was a notation," he said. "In the survey." "Yes." "Show me." She spread her father's papers across the desk and found the page, the 1814 survey of the northeast parcels, her father's precise hand mapping every boundary, every transfer, every deed. She turned it so he could read it and pointed to the notation in the lower right corner. He leaned over the desk. "Read it. Read it again." "He found it," William said very quietly. "Your father found the trust filing." "He did," she said. "He wasn't looking for it. He was doing the survey for the arrangement review standard practice, making sure the estate assets were accurately represented. He found the filing by accident and noted it because that is what surveyors do. He noted everything." She paused. "I don't think he understood what it meant, but I did when I read it." William straightened. "The Carver lawyers are claiming I transferred those parcels improperly," he said, "that I moved Clara's inheritance into accounts under my control. I know. If this notation is authenticated, it proves the trust was established before any transfer occurred," she said. "Before your sister died, before you had any legal motive to act improperly. The money was never in your control. It was always in hers." She folded her hands on the desk. "Their entire case falls apart." He looked at her, not at the papers, at her. "Why?" He said, "Did your father not bring this to my lawyer himself?" "Because," she said, and this was the part she had not wanted to reach, "my father does not know I have these notes. I took them without his permission when I left Charlottesville." A beat. "Which means they are authenticated by his hand, but witnessed by mine, and I am aware that a court may question the chain of custody." The silence stretched. "You stole documents from your father," William said, "to help a man you had never met in a case that has nothing to do with you." "I stole documents from my father," she corrected. To help a child who deserves to stay in her home. The man is incidental. Something moved across his face. She couldn't name it. It was gone too fast. The man, he said very dryly, is standing right in front of you. I noticed, she said. He almost smiled. It didn't complete itself, but it was closer than she had seen from him in 9 days, and she found that it changed something in the quality of the room, shifted it fractionally towards something that felt almost like air. Then his expression closed again. Miss Carter, he said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. I've been honest with you since I walked back into this room, she said. I intend to continue. Your father arranged this marriage, he said. A marriage that, as far as I am aware, I have not agreed to. He held her gaze. I received the Carter proposal. I have not responded to it. I did not respond because I was occupied with the hearing and because... He stopped. Because, she said. Because I did not know what to say to it, he said with the bluntness of a man who has run out of polished language and decided that plain honesty was more efficient. I have not thought about marriage since my wife died. I am not certain I know how to think about it. Evelyn absorbed this. Then we are in the same position, she said. Because I had not thought about marriage to a stranger until my father decided otherwise. And I am not in the habit of doing things I haven't thought through. Which is why you came here dressed as a maid. Which is why I came here dressed as a maid, she confirmed. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his chair and sat down. All right, Miss Carter, he said. Then let us both think it through. He picked up the survey notes. Starting with this. I need to get these to Hargrove by morning. Can you walk me through your father's notation system? She pulled her chair closer to the desk. Yes, she said. I can. They worked until midnight. She had not expected to feel comfortable with him. She had expected tension. The formal, brittle tension of two strangers navigating a deception and its aftermath. She had expected him to keep the desk between them as a symbol to speak to her in the careful register of a man maintaining appropriate distance from a woman who had wronged him. Instead, within 20 minutes of sitting down with the survey documents, they had shifted into something that felt less like an uneasy truce and more like she did not have a word for it. A collaboration. The kind that happens between two people who discover unexpectedly that they speak the same language. He knew land law. Of course he did. He'd been managing the estate since he was 24, had learned the legal framework out of necessity, had read every deed and title and transfer document with the thoroughness of a man who trusted no one else to do it correctly. When she pointed to a notation in the survey, he understood immediately why it mattered. When he identified a discrepancy in the Carver filing, she could follow his reasoning without explanation. They did not agree on everything. This boundary marker, he said, pointing to a line in the Northeast survey. Your father has placed it here. The Carver filing has it 30 feet east. My father's placement is correct, she said. I walked that boundary with him when I was 16. It follows the creek line. The Carver filing cites the original 1798 deed. The 1798 deed was drawn before the creek changed course in 1803, she said. The flood. It shifted the natural boundary. My father's survey accounts for that. Carver's doesn't either by ignorance or by choice. He looked at her. You walked that boundary, he said, when you were 16. I walked every boundary my father surveyed from the time I was 12, she said. He didn't have a son, he had me. I learned the work. He set down the page. Miss Carter, he said slowly, do you understand what you are telling me? I'm telling you, I can read a survey. You're telling me, he said, that you may be the only person in the state of Virginia who can directly testify to the location of that boundary marker as of 1814. She had not quite assembled it that way in her own mind. She assembled it now. Yes, she said. I suppose I am. The silence between them shifted again. That, he said very carefully, complicates things. How so? Because I cannot use your testimony without explaining who you are, he said. And if I explain who you are, the court will know that the daughter of the man who conducted the original survey was living in my household under a false name. And that will raise questions I do not have clean answers to." She saw the problem immediately. "They'll say I fabricated the testimony," she said, "or that you arranged it." "Yes, or that my father arranged it as part of the marriage negotiation." "Yes." She sat back. He sat back. They looked at each other across the desk with the mutual recognition of two people who have just discovered that the solution to one problem has created three others, and that all three of those problems are their own fault. "Well," she said. "Indeed," he said, and then unexpectedly, impossibly, he laughed. It was brief. A single exhale of sound surprised out of him, as if laughter was a door he had forgotten existed and had stumbled through by accident. But it was real, and it changed his face completely. Took 10 years off. It took the exhaustion and the careful distance, and left something underneath that was, she thought, closer to who he actually was. He caught himself, pressed his mouth closed. "I apologize," he said. "Don't," she said. "It's the right response. The situation it is objectively absurd." "You broke into my house as a servant," he said, "to investigate me. And in doing so, you accidentally became the most important witness in my custody case." "When you say it like that." "It is absurd," he said. "I don't know whether to be furious or grateful." "You could be both," she offered. "Simultaneously. I find that's often the most accurate emotional position." He looked at her. "You are not what I expected," he said, "from the arrangement proposal." "What did you expect?" "Someone more." He paused, searching for the word. "Compliant?" "I'm sorry to disappoint you." "You haven't," he said. Then, as if he'd said more than he intended, he looked back at the papers. "We need a way to authenticate your testimony independently of your identity. If your father—" "My father would come," she said. "If I wrote to him. He would not be happy, but he would come. He is at his worst a man who does his legal duty." Could he testify about the boundary himself? He could testify about the 1814 survey. He would need to explain the 1803 flood. His records go back that far. She thought for a moment. He would also need to explain why his daughter was in your house. He would have opinions about that. "I imagine he would," William said dryly. "Loud ones," she said. "In writing, probably. My father does his best arguing in writing. As do most lawyers. He's a surveyor." "They're worse," William said with the confidence of a man who had dealt with both. "They have maps." She smiled before she could stop herself. He saw it. And for a moment, just a moment, something in his face opened the way a window opens when someone finally remembers there's air on the other side. Then Clara's voice came from upstairs, sleep-blurred and distant. "Uncle William." He was on his feet before the last syllable finished. "I'll be right back," he said, already moving. She listened to his footsteps on the stairs, quick, certain the steps of a man who had learned to respond to that voice without hesitation. She heard the murmur of his voice upstairs, too low to make out words, and Clara's answering murmur, and then silence, and then his steps again coming back. He returned to the study, stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at her sitting at his desk, surrounded by his documents. "Bad dream," he said. "Is she all right?" "She is now." He came back in, sat back down, picked up the survey page. "She gets them sometimes. She doesn't always remember what they're about." He looked at the page without seeing it for a moment. "I think she remembers more than she knows she remembers. About her parents, about the house when there were more people in it." He set the page down. "She was 6 months old when they died. She shouldn't be able to remember anything." "And yet, children carry things," Evelyn said, "in their bodies, even when their minds can't hold the shape of it." He looked at her. "Yes," he said. "Exactly that." He was quiet for a moment. "You're good with her. I've noticed. These last 9 days. She doesn't take to people easily." "She's perceptive," Evelyn said. "She reads a room the way adults should and don't. She knew from the first day that I wasn't an ordinary servant. He stilled. She knew. She didn't know what I was, instead, Evelyn said. But she knew I wasn't what I said I was. She told me on the second day that I held a dust cloth wrong. She paused. She was correct. He stared at her. My 7-year-old ward identified the deception that my entire household missed, he said. To be fair to your household, Evelyn said, they weren't looking for it. Clara looked at everything. She does, he said. Something in his voice changed when he spoke about the child softened at the edge, the way iron softens when it's been kept close to a fire long enough. She has her mother's eyes. And her mother saw everything too. It was disconcerting. He paused. It was one of the things He stopped. I am sorry. This is not a conversation for midnight. I don't mind? Evelyn said. I do, he said, but gently. I am not accustomed to speaking about her. Your wife. My wife. He straightened the papers in front of him. She was not a happy woman despite what you may have heard about our marriage. She was not happy when we married, and I was not skilled enough or wise enough at 24 to understand what she needed, and I was not. He stopped again. What the county says about me is not wrong in all respects. I was not a good husband. I was attentive to the estate and inattentive to the person living in it. I believed that providing material security was the same as providing a home. His jaw tightened. I was wrong. I understood that too late, and she was gone before I could do anything with the understanding. The room was very still. That is the thing I carry, he said. Not that she died. People die. But that she was unhappy here in this house for 3 years, and I did not see it clearly enough to change. He looked at Evelyn steadily. So when you ask why I do not wish to remarry, that is why. Because I failed once at the most important thing a husband can do, which is simply to pay attention, and I do not trust myself to do better. Evelyn looked at him for a long time. You are paying attention right now, she said. He blinked. You have been paying attention for 4 years, she said. To Clara, to this estate, to the people who work here. Ruth told me you raised her wages twice in the last year because you noticed she was supporting her mother in Fredericksburg. Thomas the groundskeeper told me you sat with him for 2 hours when his wife was ill last winter, going over which duties could be redistributed so he could be home in the evenings. She held his gaze. That is not inattention, Mr. Hawthorne. That is a man who learned something very painful and decided to become someone different. He was very still. Thomas told you that, he said. Thomas talks, she said, especially when he's weeding. He talks to servants. I was a servant, she reminded him. He exhaled. Yes, he said. You were. He looked at his hands on the desk. Miss Carter. Sir. I owe you an apology. She waited. I asked you to leave, he said. When I found out who you were, I asked you to leave and I did not. He stopped. I did not ask you why. Not then. I was angry, and I reacted to the anger, and He pressed his mouth together. I have spent 4 years telling myself that anger is a luxury I cannot afford, and apparently I was wrong about that too. You asked me why when I was in the doorway, she said. I asked you about the documents, he said. That is not the same thing. It wasn't. She hadn't thought he'd noticed the difference. Mr. Hawthorne, she said. William, he said. Then, as if catching himself, if you prefer, given the circumstances. William, she said. I came here to find out if you were a man worth marrying. I did not come here to judge you against a standard of perfection. A man who has made mistakes and knows it is considerably more trustworthy than a man who has never had to examine himself at all. He looked at her. And what, he said very quietly, is your assessment after 9 days? She considered the question the way it deserved. I think, she said, that you are the most honest, dishonest man I have ever met. You are honest with yourself to a fault. You have cataloged your failures so thoroughly that you've stopped looking for the evidence on the other side. She paused. And I think Clara is lucky to have you. And I think the county is wrong about you. And I think... She stopped. He waited. I think, she said more carefully, that I would like to stay, if you will allow it. Not as a servant. Not as... She stopped again. I would like to help with the case. I have the documents. I know the land. And a breath. I would like to stay. The fire in the grate had burned low. William Hawthorne looked at the woman sitting across his desk, the woman who had come to his house as a lie and stayed to tell him the truth, and she watched him make a decision she could see in his face before he said it out loud. There is a guest room in the West Wing, he said. Mrs. Aldridge will prepare it in the morning. That's not necessary. It is necessary, he said, because you are not a servant, Miss Carter, and you will not sleep in a servant's room. He stood, gathered the survey documents carefully, the way he handled everything precisely with full attention. Also because, if we are to present your father's original survey to the court, we need to spend the next 6 weeks building a case around it, and that will require access to the estate records, which are in this study, and it will be considerably more efficient if you are in the house. She stood. You're asking me to stay, she said, for strategic reasons. I am asking you to stay, he said, for several reasons. He did not elaborate on what those several reasons were. He simply offered her the survey notes, her father's notes, her evidence. The thing she had brought into his house as a weapon and discovered was also a gift. Good night, Miss Carter. She took the notes. Good night, William, she said. She was at the door when he spoke again. Miss Carter. She turned. He was standing at his desk in his shirt sleeves in the low firelight, and he looked she would think about this later. Lying awake in the small servants' room she had not yet vacated, he looked like a man who had been holding his breath for a very long time and had just tentatively let it out. Thank you, he said, for coming back into the room. She understood he didn't mean tonight. He meant the moment in the library. The moment after he'd asked her to leave. The moment she had turned in the doorway and decided to stay long enough to tell him one more truth. You're welcome, she said. And she went to bed. She did not sleep for a long time. In the morning, everything had changed, and nothing had changed, and that Evelyn was learning was the particular nature of trust. It did not announce itself. It simply began quietly while you were thinking about something else. Mrs. Aldridge moved her things to the West Wing without comment. She was not a woman who asked unnecessary questions. She arranged the room, set a fresh pitcher and basin, and said only, Breakfast is at 7, Miss Carter, with the emphasis of a woman who had suspected something all along and was satisfied to be proven right. Clara found her at the breakfast table. She stopped in the doorway and stared. You're sitting at the table, she said. I am, Evelyn agreed. Emma always ate in the kitchen. Evelyn held the child's gray gaze steadily. My name, she said, is Evelyn. I owe you an apology for not telling you that sooner. Clara crossed the room and sat down across from her with the seriousness of a judge taking the bench. Uncle William told me, she said. This morning. He said you are the lady who was supposed to come at the end of summer. She paused. He said you came early because you wanted to see if we were good people first. Something like that, Evelyn said. Are we? Clara asked. Good people? Evelyn looked at the child, at her serious gray eyes, and her too large dress, and the small, careful way she had of holding herself like someone who had learned early that the world could shift without warning, and it was best to be ready. Yes, she said. You are. Clara considered this. Uncle William cried once, she said, when he thought I was asleep. He was in the nursery. She looked at the table. I didn't tell him I saw, because I thought it would make him sad to know. Evelyn felt something tighten in her chest. That was kind of you, she said. He tries very hard, Clara said, to not be sad in front of me. She picked up her fork. I try very hard too. So we're both pretending. She looked up. Is that what grown-ups do? Sometimes, Evelyn said. The ones who love each other. Clara nodded as if this confirmed something she had already suspected. I'm glad you're staying, she said with the finality of a 7-year-old closing a matter she considered settled. So am I, Evelyn said. She meant it. William came to breakfast late. She heard him on the stairs, paused outside the dining room, and she understood from the brief hesitation that he was adjusting to the same thing she was adjusting to the strangeness of the morning after honesty, when the night's frankness sits in the air between two people and neither of them quite knows what to do with it in the daylight. He came in. He sat at the head of the table. Clara said, "Good morning, Uncle William. Evelyn says we are good people." He looked at Evelyn. "Does she?" he said. "I expressed the opinion," Evelyn said. He said, and reached for the coffee and something in the quiet economy of that response, not dismissal, not agreement, simply an acknowledgement that the morning existed and was being shared, settled in her chest in a way she did not examine too carefully. They ate. They spoke of ordinary things, the heat, the garden, the mare in the south stable who was about to foal. Clara talked at length about Arthur the beetle, who had been relocated to the garden and was reported to be thriving. William listened to all of it with the focused attention of a man for whom a child's happiness was genuinely the most important intelligence briefing of the day. It was the most ordinary breakfast Evelyn had ever had. It was, she would think later, the one that changed everything. Because it was afterward, when Clara had run off to the garden and the breakfast things had been cleared, and William had spread the survey documents on the dining room table, and they were standing side by side, working through the Carver filing. Close enough that she could see the particular quality of attention he brought to a problem, the way his mind moved through complexity, with the same careful precision he brought to everything. It was in that moment that Evelyn Carter understood something she had not permitted herself to understand before. She had come here to judge this man. She had not come here to care about him. But the heart, as it turns out, does not ask permission. The door from the yard opened. Thomas the groundskeeper stood in the frame, hat in hand, his face carrying the particular expression of a man delivering news he'd rather not deliver. "Sir," he said, "there's a carriage at the gate. Richmond plates." He paused. "It's got the Carver crest on it." The dining room went very quiet. William straightened. "How many?" he said. "2 men, sir, and a woman I don't recognize." Thomas's jaw tightened. "She's asking to see Miss Clara." Evelyn looked at William. William looked at the documents on the table, 6 weeks of work they hadn't yet done, a case they hadn't yet built, a trust filing that hadn't yet been authenticated. "Tell them," he said very evenly, "that the Duke of Hawthorne estate is not receiving visitors today." "Yes, sir." Thomas didn't move. "Sir, the woman, she's saying she has a court letter, granting her visitation rights." The silence this time had an edge to it. Evelyn said quietly, "That's impossible. The hearing isn't for 6 weeks. "They moved it," William said. Something in his voice had changed, still controlled, still measured, but underneath it, something that she now recognized as fear, the kind that lives in a man who loves something he cannot afford to lose. "They petitioned for early access, and they didn't tell us." He looked at Evelyn. She looked at him. "Get Clara," he said. "Where?" "Upstairs. Her room. Lock the door. I don't care what that letter says, they are not seeing her today without my lawyer present." He was already moving toward the hall. "Thomas, tell them to wait at the gate." "Yes, sir." Evelyn was on her feet. "William." He stopped. "Don't meet them angry," she said. "They want you angry. Angry is the evidence they're building." He looked at her for one moment. The survey notes on the table. Clara's laughter still audible from the garden. The sound of a carriage on the road outside, the whole fragile structure of everything he had built, teetering on what happened in the next 10 minutes. He exhaled. He straightened his jacket. "Get Clara," he said quietly now. "Please." She was already moving. She went through the kitchen out to the garden, and she found Clara crouched by the rose bushes deep in conversation with Arthur the beetle, completely unaware that everything was about to get harder. "Clara," she said, "come with me." Clara looked up, read her face immediately, those gray eyes, that uncanny precision. "Is it the court people?" she said. Evelyn held out her hand. Clara stood up, took it. She didn't ask any more questions. She held Evelyn's hand, and she walked with her back into the house and up the stairs. And at no point did she cry or argue or pretend she didn't understand what was happening, because she was 7 years old, and she had already learned that the world shifted without warning. But at the door of her room, she stopped. She looked up at Evelyn. "Will you stay?" she said. "While Uncle William talks to them, will you stay up here with me?" Evelyn squeezed her hand. "Yes," she said, "I'm staying." She meant it in every sense of the word. The carriage sat at the gate for 40 minutes. Evelyn knew this because Clara counted. The child sat on the floor of her bedroom, with her back against the bed, and counted the minutes on the small clock on her dresser, not because she needed to know the time, but because counting was something to do with her hands and her mind, while the rest of her waited for the world to decide what happened next. At minute 12, she said, "They're not leaving." "No," Evelyn said. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, close enough to touch, far enough to give the child room to be whatever she needed to be. At minute 23, Clara said, "The last time the court people came, Uncle William didn't sleep for 2 days. He thought I didn't notice. I noticed." "I know," Evelyn said. At minute 38, Clara set down the counting and looked up at Evelyn with those gray eyes that saw everything. "Are you scared?" she asked. Evelyn considered the question seriously, the way Clara deserved. "Yes," she said. "A little." Clara nodded slowly. "Me too." She pulled her knees up to her chest. "But you didn't run away, even though you could." "I'm not going to run away," Evelyn said. "Promise?" The words sat in the air between them, small and enormous, at the same time, the way only a child's questions can be. "I promise," Evelyn said. Downstairs, a door closed. Hard. She heard William's voice before she heard the words, that low-controlled register she had come to recognize as the voice he used when anger was present, but being managed by something stronger than anger, something closer to principle. She heard another voice, male, formal, the rounded vowels of a Richmond lawyer who had rehearsed this conversation and was now performing it. And a third voice, a woman's, which she had not expected, softer at the edges, but persistent, the way water is persistent against stone. Clara heard it too. Her whole body went still. "That's Mrs. Carver," she whispered. "Eleanor Carver." Evelyn looked at her. "You know her. She came once before, when I was little." Clara's jaw tightened in a way that looked startlingly like her uncle. "She brought me a doll. She kept touching my hair." A pause. Uncle William made her stop. Evelyn filed this away. Filed away the way Clara's hands had curled into fists in her lap. Filed away the name Eleanor Carver, and the particular quality of discomfort on the child's face, which was not the vague discomfort of a stranger, but the specific discomfort of someone you had already assessed and found wanting. "Stay here," she said. Clara grabbed her wrist. "Don't go down there alone," she said. "They'll—" She stopped, swallowed. "They'll say things about Uncle William. They always say things about him that aren't true, and he has to just stand there and listen because he's not allowed to—" Her voice cracked just once, and she pressed her mouth shut against it. "Please don't let them say things." Evelyn covered the child's hand with her own. "Listen to me," she said. "Your uncle is the most careful man I have ever met. He is not going to lose this. Do you understand me?" Clara looked at her. "Do you believe that?" she said. "Or are you just saying it?" "I believe it," Evelyn said. "Now let go of my wrist." Clara let go. Evelyn went downstairs. The scene in the front hall was exactly as controlled and as dangerous as she had expected. William stood at the center of it with his arms at his sides, which she now knew was what he looked like when he was working hardest to contain himself. Across from him, a man in a gray coat was holding a folded document with the bearing of someone who knew the document was a weapon and was enjoying the weight of it in his hands. Beside him, a woman of perhaps 50, fine-boned, well-dressed, with the kind of face that had been beautiful once and now had the quality of something preserved past its season, stood watching William with an expression that Evelyn could only describe as acquisitive. This was Eleanor Carver. She saw Evelyn come down the stairs, and something shifted in her expression, a quick, appraising flicker. The kind of assessment that takes half a second and reaches a conclusion it will not revise. "Who is this?" she said. William turned. He looked at Evelyn on the stairs. His expression gave nothing away, but his eyes communicated something in the space of a breath, something between a question and a warning, and she thought something that might have been relief. "Miss Carter is my guest," he said. The lawyer Hargrove would have told her this was a man named Aldous Price Carver, family solicitor, Richmond, Virginia, with a reputation for finding procedural angles that other lawyers didn't think to look for, looked at Evelyn with new interest. "Carter," he said. "Of the Charlottesville Carters." "Yes," Evelyn said. She came the rest of the way down the stairs and stopped at the bottom, not moving to stand beside William, but not moving away from him either. A neutral position, a witness position. "I am a guest of Mr. Hawthorne, and I am curious, Mr. Price, how your clients obtained a visitation order without notifying the respondent." Price blinked. He had not expected that. "I'm sorry," he said in the tone of a man who was not sorry. "And you are in what capacity are you involved in this matter, Miss Carter?" "She is my guest," William said again, flat and final. "I have knowledge of the land records pertinent to this case," Evelyn said, before William could stop her. She kept her voice level. Informational. The voice of her father doing a deposition. "Including the 1814 survey of the northeast parcels, which I understand your client's filing references." She looked at Price steadily. "I would be very interested to discuss your interpretation of that survey at the September hearing." The silence that followed was the kind that happened when a room recalculated. Eleanor Carver's eyes moved from Evelyn to William and back again. "A surveyor's daughter," she said with the particular warmth of a woman who had just decided she needed to be warmer. "How interesting. And you are staying here at the manor?" "I am," Evelyn said. "As a guest." "As a guest," Evelyn confirmed. Eleanor Carver looked at William. Her expression had shifted, still pleasant, still controlled, but underneath it, something harder, recalculating the same way Price had recalculated, reassessing a situation that had just grown more complicated than she had planned for. "Well," she said, "we have no wish to create difficulty. We simply wish to see the child, to ensure she is thriving." She smiled. "We care deeply about Clara's well-being." "You care deeply about Clara's inheritance?" William said very quietly. The smile did not waver. "Mr. Hawthorne," Price said, "my clients have a lawful—" "Your clients have a paper," William said. "Show it to my lawyer. His office is in Charlottesville. I will ensure he receives it by week's end." He moved to the front door and opened it. "Good day." Price looked at the open door, looked at his document, looked at Eleanor Carver. She gave him a small nod. They left. William closed the door behind them. The hall was very quiet. Evelyn let out the breath she had been holding since the second stare. "How did they get the visitation order?" she said. "Judge Alderman," William said. "He is a friend of the Carver family." He turned. His hands were clasped behind his back, the way they were when he needed something to hold. "I did not know he had been contacted." "Then they have someone in the court." "Apparently. Which means whatever we bring to the September hearing will be seen in advance," he said. "Yes, I am aware." He looked at her. "That thing you said, about the survey, the 1814 records. I wanted them to know it existed," she said. "I wanted them to spend the next 6 weeks worrying about what's in it." "You gave away our strongest piece of evidence." "I gave away the existence of it," she said. "Not the content, They'll spend time trying to find a counter-argument to a document they haven't seen. That's 6 weeks they're not spending on something else. She met his eyes. Was that wrong? He was quiet for a moment. No, he said. It was not wrong. He looked at the closed door. It was exactly what my lawyer would have done, except faster. I grew up watching my father in depositions, she said. I know, he said. And then after a pause, thank you, again. She was beginning to notice that he said thank you, the way some men said I'm sorry with the sincerity of someone who meant it, and the difficulty of someone who hadn't said it enough and was learning late how much it mattered. Go tell Clara they're gone, she said. He went upstairs. She stayed in the hall and listened to the carriage roll away from the gate, and she thought about Eleanor Carver's eyes, that quick, acquisitive assessment, and she understood with the certainty of a woman who had grown up learning to read a room that this was not over. This had not even properly started. 3 days later, the second letter arrived. Not from Price, not from the court, from her father. It came addressed to Miss Evelyn Carter, care of Hawthorne Manor, which meant her father knew where she was, which meant someone had told him. She opened it at the kitchen table with Ruth, pretending very thoroughly not to be watching from across the room. Evelyn. The letter began in her father's precise surveyor's hand. I have received word of your present situation from a business associate in Charlottesville who saw a carriage from the Hawthorne estate on the Richmond Road, and mentioned to me that a young woman matching your description had been noted at the manor. I will not pretend that I am not angry. I will also not pretend that I am surprised. You have your mother's instincts and my methods, and the combination has always been inconvenient for everyone around you. She almost smiled. I have also received separately a letter from a Mr. Aldous Price of Richmond, inquiring on behalf of his clients about the 1814 Northeast Parcel Survey. He asked me to confirm that no trust filing appeared in my survey notes. I told him I would need to review my records. I have reviewed my records. I found the trust notation. I believe you have already found it too. She went very still. I am coming to Charlottesville next week on other business. If it would be useful for me to stop at Hawthorne Manor on the return journey, I am available to do so. I will bring the original survey ledger. I will also bring your mother, who is beside herself with various concerns. I will not enumerate here as the letter would exceed 10 pages. Your father, James Carter. P.S. The Duke's reputation in this county is worse than he deserves. I have suspected this for some time. Do not marry him before I arrive. She read the letter twice. She folded it. She went to find William. She found him in the East Wing. Not in the nursery. She had not expected the nursery. He was in the corridor outside it, sitting on the floor with his back against the wall. A thing so entirely at odds with the formal bearing she had come to associate with him that she stopped in the doorway of the hall and simply looked for a moment. He had a letter in his hand. Different from hers, older paper, the fold soft with handling. He heard her, looked up. He did not move to stand, which surprised her. In 9 days, and however many mornings she had known William Hawthorne, she had never seen him not stand when she entered a room. My father is coming, she said. He brings the original survey ledger and my mother. Something moved in his face. When? End of next week. That's good, he said. He looked at the letter in his hand. That is very good. She came down the corridor and sat down beside him on the floor. Not across from him. Beside him. Because that was what the moment called for, and she had stopped overthinking what the moments called for. He looked at her. Margaret's letter, he said. He held it slightly, not offering it, just acknowledging it. Her last one. She wrote it 3 days before she died. I didn't receive it until 2 weeks after because I was in Richmond for the land filing. His voice was even. The trust filing for Clara. She knew you were protecting Clara, Evelyn said. She knew, he said. She understood the estate law better than she ever let on. She understood everything better than she let on. He folded the letter with the same care he brought to everything. She told me in this letter that she was sorry we had not managed to be happy together, that she believed I was a good man who did not know yet how to let people see it. He paused. She said she hoped I would figure it out. Evelyn said nothing. I have been trying, he said very quietly, to figure it out. I know, she said. He looked at her sideways. Do you? I've been watching you for nearly 2 weeks, she said. I've watched you figure it out every day. He was quiet for a moment. Then Eleanor Carver's letter to the court cited my emotional unavailability as grounds for the guardianship challenge. He said it flatly, the way a person says something they have to say out loud before they can properly be angry about it. They argue that a man who cannot form emotional attachments is unfit to raise a child. That is convenient, he said, because it is not disprovable in the normal way. You cannot introduce a document that proves a man feels things. He tilted his head back against the wall. Clara could testify. I would never allow that. No, Evelyn agreed. Hargrove says character witnesses, former employees, business associates, people who have known me over time. He paused. Most of the people who have known me over time have accepted the county's assessment of me. Because I did not correct it. Because He stopped. Because you were protecting yourself, she said. Because I did not know how to do otherwise, he said. The corridor was quiet. In the garden below, Clara was singing something a tuneless, self-invented. Something that carried through the summer heat with the absolute confidence of a child who has not yet been told that singing required an audience. She sings, Evelyn said. Constantly, William said. And the word came out warm, helplessly. Warm the way words come out when you love something so much you forget to be careful about it. Evelyn looked at him. He hurt himself. He did not take it back. William, she said. Miss Carter. Evelyn, she said. He looked at her. A pause. Evelyn, you do not have a problem with emotional attachment, she said. You have a problem with allowing people to see it, which is what Eleanor Carver is counting on. She held his gaze. If you walk into that courtroom the way you walk into every room closed correct controlled, they will use your composure as the evidence against you. They will say, look at him. Look how little he cares. And if I don't? If you don't, they lose their argument. He was very still. Are you suggesting, he said slowly, that I perform emotion for a court? I'm suggesting, she said, that you stop performing the absence of it. She paused. There is a difference. He looked at the letter in his hand. He looked at the garden where Clara was still singing. He said very quietly, I don't know if I can do that. I know, she said. I'm going to help you. He turned to look at her, and she saw it again, that opening, that fractional unlocking, that happens sometimes when he forgot to keep everything shut, and she thought, this is the man underneath. This is who he is when nobody is watching. Or when the person watching is someone he has, despite everything, decided to trust. All right, he said. All right, she agreed. They sat in the corridor outside the nursery in the July heat, and the sound of Clara singing, and neither of them moved for a while, and it was the most companionable silence Evelyn Carter had ever sat in. The twist came on a Thursday, which seemed to be the day that this particular story reserved for its worst surprises. Price sent a messenger. The message was addressed to William, but Evelyn was in the hall when it arrived, and she saw Thomas's face when he brought it, in that particular expression of a man carrying something he would rather not be carrying. William read it standing in the hall, and she watched the color leave his face. Not dramatically. Not the way it happened in theatrical performances. Just quietly, systematically, the way warmth leaves a room when a window is opened in winter. He handed her the letter. She read it. Price had filed a secondary motion, not about the guardianship, about the estate itself. They were challenging the validity of the trust filing on a different grounds, not that it was improper, but that it had been filed by a duke who was at the time of filing negotiating a marriage contract that would give his future wife legal access to the estate assets. They were arguing that the trust had been created not to protect Clara, but to shelter estate assets from a marriage negotiation, which would make the filing fraudulent, the trust invalid, and every land transfer that followed it reversible. They were not just trying to take Clara, they were trying to take everything. The marriage arrangement, Evelyn said. Her voice was very steady. They know about it. They have always known about it, William said. The Carter proposal was submitted through the county register. It is public record. He moved to the study, and she followed. What they have done is connect it to the trust filing date. The trust was filed in January 1814, she said. The Carter proposal was received in March 1814. 2 months apart. 2 months apart, she said. And Price will argue to the court that the trust was created in anticipation of the marriage negotiation, that you saw it coming and filed ahead of it to protect the assets. Which is not what happened. Which is not what happened, she agreed. But which is a narrative a court could accept if it wanted to. She looked at him. Did your lawyer know about the marriage proposal when he filed the trust? Hargrove filed the trust. Hargrove also handled the preliminary correspondence for the marriage arrangement. William looked at the desk. They are going to call him as a witness. They are going to ask him whether the two were connected, and he is an honest man. What will he say? He will say that they were not connected, William said. And then Price will ask him how he can be certain, and Hargrove will say because I told him so, and Price will say that the Duke told you what to file and when, and Hargrove will say yes, because that is how a solicitor works, and the court will draw its own conclusion, Evelyn finished. Yes. She sat down, thought hard for 30 seconds. My father, she said. What about him? My father received the preliminary inquiry about the marriage arrangement in February 1814, she said, before the proposal was formally submitted. Standard practice, his business associate in Richmond contacted him informally first to assess interest before any formal filing. She looked at William. Do you understand what I'm saying? He was still for a moment. Then, the informal inquiry came after January. The informal inquiry came in mid-February, she said. 6 weeks after the trust was filed. I saw the date in my father's correspondence files. I was not looking for it. I was looking for the survey notes, but it was there. She held his gaze. My father can testify that the first communication he received regarding the marriage arrangement was after the trust had already been established, which means you could not have filed the trust in anticipation of an arrangement you had not yet been informed of. The study was very quiet. Evelyn, he said, your lawyer needs to contact my father today, she said, before Price does. Evelyn, I can write the letter. My father trusts my read of a legal situation more than he trusts most. Evelyn. His voice was different. She stopped. He was looking at her with an expression she had not seen on him before, something unguarded, something that did not have the careful distance she had come to expect from him. Do you understand what you have done? She looked at him. You came into this house with no obligation to any of this, he said, with no stake in this case, with every reason to simply deliver the survey notes and leave, and instead you have... He stopped, pressed his mouth closed, started again. You have spent 2 weeks learning my household, learning my niece, learning every weakness in this case and finding the answer to each one before I even saw the question coming. He shook his head. Why? She opened her mouth, closed it. The truthful answer was complicated. The truthful answer involved 9 days of watching him read to Clara and pay his workers fairly and carry the weight of everything alone with such precision that nobody thought to ask if he was tired. The truthful answer involved the East Wing nursery and the portrait of Margaret and the baby, and the way his voice had broken just once, just slightly, when he said, I will not allow it. The truthful answer involved breakfast and the library and a corridor floor at midnight, and the particular quality of silence between two people who have stopped pretending. She said the simplest version of the truth. Because it's the right thing to do, she said. And because Clara deserves to stay in her home. And because... She paused. Because you are worth fighting for. Whether or not you believe that yet. The study held very still around them. Outside somewhere in the house, a clock ticked forward. William Hawthorne looked at the woman across his desk. The woman who had arrived as a lie and stayed to become the most honest thing in his house, and he said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, We should write that letter. Yes, she said. We should. He pulled paper from the drawer. He handed her the pen. You write it, he said. You know his hand better than I do. You know what will convince him. She took the pen. She wrote. He stood at the window while she wrote, and she could feel the particular quality of his attention, the way he gave it fully without reservation, the way he had always given it to the things and people he was protecting. Only now the attention was pointed at her handwriting moving across the page. At the particular focus she brought to the task of saving him from a case that had been designed to undo him. When she finished, she folded the letter and looked up. He was still watching her. It will reach him in 4 days, she said. He should be able to get here within 2 weeks. The hearing is in 5 weeks. Then we have time. She held out the letter. If he agrees. He'll agree, William said. He took the letter, and for just a moment, their hands were both on it. Her fingers, and his, the paper between them, neither letting go immediately. He looked at her hands. She looked at his. He raised you, William said. Of course he'll agree. She let go of the letter. He kept his eyes on her face for 1 moment longer than necessary, and then he turned to the desk to seal it, and she looked at the window, and the Virginia heat pressed against the glass, and the clock on the mantel ticked on toward September. She did not know Mrs. Aldridge had been listening at the door until the housekeeper appeared in the kitchen that evening with the particular expression of a woman who has observed something she intends to do something about. He hasn't looked at anyone like that in 4 years, Mrs. Aldridge said without preamble, without looking up from the pot she was stirring. Evelyn did not ask what she meant. I know, she said. He won't say it, Mrs. Aldridge said. In case you're waiting for him to say it first. He'd sooner walk barefoot to Richmond than say something before he's absolutely certain he means it. I know that too, Evelyn said. Mrs. Aldridge looked at her. Do you mean it's staying here? Fighting this case? All of it? Evelyn was quiet for a moment. She thought of Clara's hand in hers at the bedroom door. She thought of William's voice saying she deserves what's hers through a closed study door the night she had still been a stranger in his house. She thought of a letter from a dead woman that said, I hope you figure it out. Yes, she said. I mean it. Mrs. Aldridge nodded, once. The nod of a woman who had tested a thing and found it solid. Good, she said. Then eat something. You've been at that desk since morning. The night before her father was expected, Clara came to Evelyn's room. She knocked, which was new. Clara usually simply appeared as children do with the confidence of someone who has determined that a door is not a barrier. Come in, Evelyn said. Clara came in. She was in her nightdress, hair down, feet bare. She crossed the room and climbed onto the bed with the practicality of a child who has decided where she wants to be and sees no reason to negotiate about it. I can't sleep, she said. I know the feeling, Evelyn said. Clara pulled at the edge of the quilt. What if your father doesn't help? He will. But what if... Clara. Evelyn looked at her steadily. My father has read every survey he has ever conducted at least 3 times. He has never in 30 years allowed an error in his records to go uncorrected. He is coming here because his name is on that document, and he will not allow his name to be used in a way that is false. She paused. He is also coming because he has known for 2 weeks that his daughter is here, and he wants to make sure she is all right. Clara was quiet for a moment. Are you all right? She said. Yes, Evelyn said. Because of us, Clara said. Or just in general. Evelyn looked at the child. At the enormous gray eyes, and the careful too-old face, and the small person underneath it all, who was simply asking whether someone had chosen to stay because they wanted to, or only because they had to. Because of you, she said. Both of you. Clara absorbed this. Then she lay down on her side of the bed, pulled the quilt up to her chin, and closed her eyes. Uncle William smiles more, she said. Since you came? Evelyn lay back against the pillow. Does he? She said. It's small, Clara said. But it's there, I can tell. Outside, the Virginia night was thick and close, and full of the sounds of summer, the insects, the far-off creak of the manor settling in the heat, the occasional whisper of wind through the roses that bloomed without permission over the garden wall. Evelyn stared at the ceiling. She thought about a man reading Aesop's fables, about a child saying he tries very hard, about a letter from a dead woman who had asked her husband to become someone better and had not lived to see whether he managed it. He was managing it. She was going to make sure the court knew that, whatever it cost. James Carter arrived on a Wednesday, which was not the day Evelyn had expected him, and he arrived not on horseback as she had imagined, but in a hired carriage with her mother beside him, which meant the situation had escalated from her father's concern to her mother's concern, which was an entirely different order of magnitude. She heard the carriage at the gate from the library window. She was there with William working through Hargrove's revised case outline for the 4th time that week, and she set down her pen before the carriage had fully stopped. William looked up. "Your father," she said. "Already. He's 2 days early." She straightened her papers, smoothed her dress, caught herself smoothing her dress, and stopped because she was not a woman who smoothed her dress for anyone, and the fact that she was doing it now told her something she was not quite ready to name. He does that when he's anxious. He arrives before people expect him, so he can assess the situation before they've had time to prepare. William stood. "He sounds like you." "He sounds exactly like me," she said. "Which is why I know every move he's going to make." She looked at William steadily. "Let me go out first. Give me 10 minutes with him before you come down." "You want to manage the introduction?" "I want to give him time to be angry at me in private, so he doesn't do it in front of you." William studied her. "Is he going to be very angry?" he said. "Moderately," she said. "He'll be loud about it for about 5 minutes, and then he'll want to see the documents, and after that, he'll forget to be angry because the documents will be more interesting." She picked up her notes. "My mother will be angry longer, but more quietly. Which is worse?" She went downstairs. She was at the front door before the carriage had finished stopping. Her father stepped down first. James Carter, 52 years old, built like a man who had spent 30 years walking property lines in all weather with her same dark eyes and her same way of assessing a space the moment he entered it. He looked at her standing in the doorway of Hawthorne Manor, and his face did 3 things in rapid succession: relief, fury, and then the particular expression of a father who has rehearsed what he wants to say, and is now deciding whether the rehearsal was adequate. It was not. "Evelyn Margaret Carter," he said. "Papa," she said. He crossed the distance between them in 4 strides and took her by the shoulders and looked at her face the way a man looks at a thing he had been afraid of losing and is verifying is still intact. Then he let go, stepped back and said, "You stole my survey ledger." "I borrowed your survey notes," she said. "The ledger is still in your study. I took copies." "You came to a stranger's house under a false name." "I came to assess the man I was contracted to marry," she said. "Which is the logical thing to do?" "The logical thing." He stopped, pressed his mouth shut, started again. "You have been in this house for 3 weeks, Evelyn. 3 weeks, without a word. I sent you a letter. You sent me a letter that told me nothing except that you were alive and had found something in the survey notes, which I then had to discover the significance of myself, because you were apparently too busy." He gestured broadly at Hawthorne Manor at Virginia, at the general situation, to explain. "I explained in the second letter. The second letter arrived yesterday. That's why I'm here to explain in person." Her father looked at her. She looked at her father. It was as it had always been a contest between 2 people who were too similar to out-argue each other and had long ago settled into a kind of informed standoff. Her mother appeared at the carriage door. Catherine Carter was a small woman with a straight back and eyes that missed nothing, and a voice that carried the particular quality of someone who had long ago decided that the truth was more efficient than anything else. She looked at Evelyn. She looked at Hawthorne Manor. She said, "Is there tea?" "Yes, Mama," Evelyn said. "Good," Catherine said, and came down from the carriage as if the matter were settled, because for her, it was. Tss. She gave them the parlor the tea in 20 minutes. She told them everything in the order it had happened without softening any of it. She told them about the gray dress and the false name